Apocalypto. So we're going to start the middle of the second chapter where Eamon is introducing his new machine to the public for the first time. Ladies and gentlemen, Eamon said, gesturing to the machine that towered over him, the fruit the past 10 years of his life were about to bear, I give you the Auriga Project, the future of space travel, the translocator. A half-hearted round of applause rose from the crowd. He had expected hesitation. They would have to see it to believe it. We've taken every precaution for the purposes of this demonstration, Eamon went on. When Ortega's team first pioneered the molecular reassembly process, it was far from safe. We know that and have made significant advances. Now a man can step through the translocator and come out on the surface of the moon as easily as he can walk across the street. We've met with the approval of an LTA oversight committee, a board of top-notch scientists picked from all over the world, many of whom are here with us tonight. So we can all witness the demonstration. We'll be using a 12th generation rover named Carbon to help us out. He's waiting in the lab below. Ruben, would you bring him up here, please? Ruben's fingers twitched and a series of glyphs lit the top of the screen, spelling out the parameters for the translocation. The great arch came to life. The keening noise amplified its pitch and intensity until it climbed above the audible range for the human ear and went silent. Blue-white sparks of energy flickered between nodes of the arch. The sphere of concentric rings around the platform spun, collecting the energy from the outer arch and concentrating it inside the sphere. The sphere spun, blurred, and radiated a soft turquoise brightness. Then the light was gone, the rings wound down, and a lunar rover appeared on the platform, its squat wheeled form perfectly intact. The crowd exploded with applause. Ruben inputted a few more commands on the console and the rover rolled to Eamon's side. Eamon tried to hide his smile. This was a parlor trick compared to what was coming next. The appearance of the rover had been meant to warm up the crowd and dispel their initial doubt. Carbon had merely been transported from the lab a few floors below ground. The surface of the moon, however, was hundreds of thousands of miles from Earth and moving at an incredible velocity. Tonight, Carbon will be making the journey to the lunar surface. He's made this journey many times in our years of testing, but tonight is the first time he will do so in public. A team is waiting for him in the research biodome of the lunar station. Ruben motioned and a new set of parameters appeared. Eamon waited for him to nod, then said, "My wife Eliana will help me christen this maiden voyage. Sweetheart, if you'll do me the honor." He held out his hand. Eliana walked across the stage and took Eamon's hand. "Traditionally, you'd break a champagne bottle across the hull," Eamon said to the audience, "but I don't know if that's recommended when we're working with electronics." When Eliana laughed, the crowd laughed along with her. Eamon and Eliana met Ruben at the control unit. As rehearsed, she stood between her husband and Ruben in front of the screen. Ruben keyed in a few commands and a series of calculations scrolled up. Eamon double-checked Ruben's work as he did it, verifying energy levels coming in from the particle accelerator and calculating the moon's position, rotation, and velocity in real time. They didn't have to speak. Eamon knew everything was going according to plan on Ruben's end by his grunts of approval. When they were ready, Ruben verified radio communication with the lunar team, then cleared the display and brought up a green initiate button. The button was strictly for show and big enough for the cameras to make out. Ruben nudged the button's digital image across the display so it was in front of Eliana. She reached out her left hand. Her new ring glittered. When her fingers came into contact with the screen, she pulled her hand back sharply as if she had been zapped by an electric shock. She rubbed her fingers and frowned. "Are you okay?" Eamon whispered into her ear, careful to hold the microphone away from his mouth. "I'm fine," she said, quick to put a smile back on her face for the cameras. She moved a few steps from the display, not part of the stage directions they had rehearsed, but Eamon was too distracted by what happened next to give it much thought. The machine screamed as it came to life. The keening noise didn't go subaudible, but escalated into a banshee's screech. Electricity popped loudly across the arch, and great tree-like shapes of blue-white lightning shot into the air in every direction. "Ruben, what's happening?" Eamon shouted, turning back to the display. A graph that measured the energy output from the particle accelerator careened into the danger zone. Ruben gestured wildly, trying to regain control of the apparatus, but the holo controls were no longer responding to his increasingly frantic motions. "It's unresponsive. Initiate emergency shutdown." Eamon dropped the mic with a clunk that was swallowed in the chaos. He leapt over to the display, yanked out a tactile keyboard from the base of the screen, and began rapidly typing in override commands designed to short-circuit the translocation. It didn't respond to those either. "Cut the power," Eamon yelled. Ruben was already tearing at the floorboards to reach the power cables beneath them. Electricity saturated the air, causing Reuben's hair to stand on end and wave wildly. Reuben held up the control unit's plug. Eamon glanced up and saw the display was dead. The arch continued to thrum with energy. "Shit," Eamon said, already knowing it was too late. The redundant power cables connecting the arch and the translocation platform to the particle accelerator meant that they would have to cut all the power cables to shut it down, and there wasn't enough time for that. "Eliana," Eamon yelled, twisting frantically as he searched for her. The light radiating from the sphere of rings this time was blinding, a bright white sun that outshone the spotlights fixed on the stage. He shielded his eyes with one hand and squinted into the light. The chairs where Lucas and Wes had been seated were empty. They must have retreated from the stage when the hopper malfunctioned. Did they take Eliana with them? But then he spotted her, silhouetted against the great ball of light that emanated from the sphere. He sprinted toward her only to stumble into something hard that tripped him and sent him sprawling to the deck. He felt the bar of the microphone stand beneath him as he pushed himself back up. He juked around Carbon, the lunar rover. She was 10 feet from him now. Eliana stretched her arm toward the sphere of light, reaching. She gasped, her mouth widening as the expanding radiance engulfed her wrist. 5 feet away. He lifted his knees, pumped his arms, reached out to grab her. The light swallowed her elbow, her shoulder, half her body. A terrible dread lined Eamon's stomach with steel wool. 2 feet. He jumped, reaching out. Instead of coming into contact with Eliana, he felt the light as a physical resistance pushing back at him like a viscous liquid. The feeling of resistance retreated suddenly. He slammed into the unforgiving hardness of alloy rings, knocking the breath from his lungs. Eliana. He gasped and writhed on the ground, shocked from the impact. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he pushed himself to his feet. Red spots crowded his vision. When they cleared, he saw that the stage was only illuminated by the spotlights now, and bulbs flashed from the media pit. The horrible screeching noise had ceased, but shouts from the audience filled his hearing. He stood on the translocation platform inside the alloy rings, alone. 2 moons and a purple sky. This is from Eliana's point of view. 1 minute, 1,000 tiny blades lacerated Eliana's skin like her body was being ripped to shreds. The next, she sat up on a hot beach and spat out sand. The heavy, humid air intensified her sudden nausea. She tried to ignore it while she took in her surroundings. The beach was too clean for the Gulf Coast, that was for sure. The humidity, too, seemed uncharacteristic for Texas, even on a sweltering summer evening. It reminded her of the time she and Eamon had made the mistake of traveling to Cancun in the middle of July. But it wasn't evening anymore. A blazing yellow sun high overhead beat her down with an oppressive heat. Eliana shivered in cold sweats as her body adjusted to the rapid change in temperature. "What the hell?" she said aloud. Hearing her own voice disperse in the thick air made her acutely aware of her isolation. She slipped off her heels and tried to stand, fighting back the flutter of panic that threatened to overtake her. Her legs wobbled, black spots crowded her vision, and she fell down with a groan. As she lay there, fighting to remain conscious, it occurred to her that the fitted black dress and low strappy heels she had chosen for the demonstration were totally inappropriate for the beach. Even olive skin like hers would burn in a matter of minutes exposed to the fiery sun. She laughed in spite of herself. She thought, "Do I not have more pressing concerns?" "Where am I?" she said, to no one. She closed her eyes and forced herself to think rationally through what she had just experienced. 1 minute she had been posing during the demonstration, with Eamon by her side, trying to make sure the cameras had a good angle on her hand with her lovely new ring, while she pressed the initiate button on the display. The next, something had tugged her toward the expanding sphere of light, her hand reaching out as if it had a will of its own. The shock she'd taken from the display screen had numbed her hand completely when it zapped her. She cracked one eye and held her hand up to the light. It felt fine. Could the ring possibly have caused whatever went wrong? Looking at it now, it seemed not much different from any other diamond, except for the gem's unusual smoky depth. When it had pulled her toward the brilliant sphere of light expanding from the translocation platform, and thinking about it, she became certain that some force had leashed her hand and drawn her to it. She remembered the diamond glowing with the same every color radiance as the sphere. Was she imagining it, or had the gemstone somehow channeled the electricity that crackled through the air? The instant of primal terror Eliana felt as the light washed over her was nothing compared to the binding knot of dread that found a seat in her gut now. Refusing to let the fear take over, Eliana struggled to her feet once more, willing her knees to be steady, and surveyed her position. She stood on a long stretch of beach that separated the dense green jungle on one side from a calm surf on the other. The ocean's flat expanse stretched all the way to the horizon, which, unless Eliana was mistaken, had a more pronounced curve than she was used to. Not 10 yards from where she stood, purple waves washed onto the shore. Eliana blinked, rubbed her oddly weary eyes. Purple waves? Am I seeing things? She walked to the water's edge. It was beautifully translucent, and, yes, a light purple in color. She turned her gaze to the cloudless sky. It was a similar shade of pale violet reflecting the sea. Or is it the other way around? Does the sea reflect the sky? Gazing up, Eliana noticed two faint moons that hung in the cloudless firmament. One appeared to be significantly smaller than the other. A big bite had been taken out of the top right shoulder of the larger satellite. Both were roughly 3/4 full, but she had no way to tell if they were waxing or waning. Her mind turned its gears again, coming to terms with the strangeness of her situation. Her nausea remained. She forced herself to be rational, thinking, "You're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy." She also knew from her experience at dig sites that she needed two things to survive the heat: shade and water. Without them, she was a goner. She dragged herself up the beach and sat in the sand dunes beneath two big floppy leaves at the edge of the jungle. Tiny insects swarmed around her sweaty neck and left red marks where they bit her. Since it was easily 20 degrees cooler in the shade, she determined not to let the bugs bother her while she allowed herself a moment to rest. Though her situation was dire, Eliana felt a wave of sympathy for Eamon. No doubt he was more panicked than she was about her disappearance. At least she knew she was alive. For all Eamon knew, she had been vaporized, her molecules scattered to the winds. It seemed like nothing more than blind luck that she had landed on solid ground, somewhere with water, even purple water, instead of being teleported to cold, empty space. What little she understood of Eamon's work made it abundantly clear which was the more likely scenario. Anybody want to